Welcome to Blogs and Articles. In this series, we look at blog posts, articles online, and news stories about love, marriage, dating, and relationships. I'll provide some coaching questions for exploration, as I would for a client who is in this situation. Then finally, I'll provide my commentary at the end of just me being myself, unfiltered and unadulterated. Hi, I'm Janelle, the relationship coach behind The Successful Invisible. I help professional Black women who are 35 plus date and partner with more self awareness and intentionality. Check out the links in the description box below to sign up for my next 5-day self awareness and dating challenge. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. All right, I came across this article on a counseling website. So it's a blog post, but it is so important because if you read the article that I published last week, one of the things that I mentioned was that abuse has been normalized, as well as my dating tip from last week. Abuse has been so normalized and the way people engage on social media, like really abusive behaviors have been normalized. I said, you know what? I want to teach all of my ladies out here about abuse, the signs of abuse, because that is something that most people are never formally educated on or educated on, not formally, but unless they're in an abusive relationship or have a close friend that's in an abusive relationship or something like that. So I felt this was totally appropriate. We're going into nicer weather. People are going to be out. People are dating. And I really want to make sure we are out here as educated and prepared as possible, and we can identify signs of abuse early. So that's my spiel. Let's jump in. DARVO, a form of gaslighting in relationships. All right. So have you ever talked to someone about something hurtful they did and then find yourself comforting them at the end of the conversation, and you're thinking, wait, I was the one upset, and what about what they did? If this sounds familiar, you might have experienced a form of gaslighting known as DARVO. We'll get to the acronym in a moment. By now, most of us have heard the term gaslighting. Although the term is sometimes used informally in everyday conversation, actual gaslighting is often hard to catch and easy to overlook in relationships. It is subtle and sometimes hidden in communication, like a wolf in sheep's clothing. In definition, gaslighting is when a person manipulates someone into questioning their own reality. This can occur in many forms, but often leaves the other person doubting their own perceptions, feeling low in self-worth, and labeling themselves as overly emotional, insensitive, or selfish. Many times, when a gaslighter is confronted about something they did or said that was hurtful, they utilize a tactic that turns the conversation around, and the victim ends up feeling the blame. This tactic of manipulation was studied by Jennifer Freyd, a psychological researcher who labeled it DARVO, an acronym for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. Gaslighters may use this tactic in romantic relationships, with friends, at work, or even in parenting. They shift the focus away from the issue at hand and begin to attack the victim. Here's how this can look. So let's say you bring up a recent problem or hurtful comment to your partner, friend, or boss. You might have evidence or reasons that you provide for your suspicions. For example, why are you in this picture with this other woman at the party? Or, Marty told me he got a raise in his performance review when you told me no one was getting raises this year. That's when this tactic begins. Deny. The accusation or suspicions are met with denial. The abuser will completely deny all evidence or accountability for their actions. This can sound like, "Are you kidding? That's not what happened." Or, "What are you talking about?" Attack. Here, the abuser goes on the offensive, often by attacking the person's character, intelligence, motivation, mental health, or emotional stability. This can sound like, "You're overreacting. You're imagining things. You're not thinking clearly. Calm down. You always get so dramatic about everything." Many of these phrases, I'm sure many of you have heard before, Take note, this is all part of an abuse tactic. Reverse victim and offender. At this point, the victim's role is shifted and they are made to feel like the abuser or offender. The abuser takes on a victim role, and the true victim is made to feel like they have done something to the abuser. There is no accountability for the abuser's actions. The abuser can sometimes end up in tears. This can sound like, you know how hard it is for me to trust someone, and then you do this to me. I can't believe this. I trusted you. I can't believe I have to sit here and listen to this. You know how much I love you, and you treat me like this. I can't do anything right in your eyes. It's always something. I try so hard, and you always find something wrong. DARVO can leave a victim feeling confused and horrible about themselves, as DARVO typically happens in relationships with gaslighting where it's already taking place. The victim's ability to rationalize or see through the abuser's behavior is difficult. The victim usually ends up either withdrawing their initial complaint or beginning to comfort the abuser. Does all of this sound familiar? If so, getting counseling is a great first step in getting the help you need to begin to understand and see more clearly what is happening in your relationship. In working with a trained counselor, you can begin to feel stronger and see what is happening more clearly. In time, you will likely feel more confident, more assertive, and better able to confront this behavior in a constructive way. All right, now let's jump into some coaching questions that I often ask or would ask in a session with a client who was going through anything similar to the article that I just read. So grab a fresh pen and a notebook and answer these coaching questions truthfully and fully in order to kind of go deeper on your own journey to greater self-awareness when it comes to dating and relationships. And as you know, first relationship, of course, that we need to get healthy around is a relationship with ourselves. So let's jump into these questions for reflection. Question 1. What specific feelings or reactions might indicate that a person is being subjected to DARVO tactics during a conversation? So to me, this is so normalized, like on so many levels in any type of discussion about race, in any type of discussion about sexism and women's rights. You will see the party who is trying to deny the reality of someone else being oppressed or harmed because the status quo benefits them. You will see DARVO. Okay. So this is a very normal technique. You see it in romantic relationships. You see it in so many places, but a lot of people don't want to own their behavior or something they've done or being called out to be accountable. So I think you can see this in a plethora of places. This is at work, this is at home, this is in social spheres, this is definitely in politics, this is definitely in relationships. You can see this with a parent-child relationship, familiar relationships, friendships. So, you know, the first thing is someone getting very defensive. And I mean, if you're not coming at them in like an attacking manner where they're going to automatically get defensive, but even trying to bring something up very calmly, you can see this. And I think that's the first indicator. They do not want you to hold them accountable for whatever they've done wrong. So they are going to do everything to shift this narrative and shift the energy of the exchange back so they're the center of the attention. And sometimes that means, and it often means, that they're the quote unquote victim when they truly aren't. So I think that this is like red flag, and women need to be aware of this. You will see this very early on. Also, when you're dating, especially in online dating, I think people are a little bolder because you are on a keyboard, because you aren't in, person together. So people usually tell on themselves pretty early. And if you ask a question or two, you'll probably notice it and see it. So I think this is a pretty easy thing to detect if you are aware of kind of the situation and who you're dealing with. So basically, anytime you're going to call somebody to be accountable for something, automatically kind of be on guard that this technique may be, employed, regardless of the type of relationship or exchange that it may be. Question 2. How can one prepare to maintain clarity and assertiveness when suspecting DARVO tactics are being used in a relationship? So, the first thing is you want to understand and be honest with yourself that you're dealing with someone who engages in these tactics. And like I said, for the first question, these can come up in any type of relationship. This particular blog post had to do with romantic relationships, but this technique can be employed in any human relationship that you have. So the first thing to kind of prepare yourself is to understand the person you're dealing with. We know 9 times out of 10, if we're talking to someone where we can bring them our challenges or frustrations, or maybe, highlight something that they've done, and they'll be like, you know what, I did that, or even if they give a little bit of resistance, for the most part, you're going to be able to talk about it and walk away from it and have that item addressed. We also know the people in our lives, whether that's coworkers, bosses, romantic partners, peers, siblings, socially, whatever, somebody you're dating, that they automatically go into this method as a default. They never like to be called out. They never like to be held accountable. We kind of know who those individuals are. And in truth, part of the growth and healing necessary to go out here and just be a better dater is pruning those people out of your life as much as possible. Not everybody can be, is a connection we can let go of. But if we can, we need to prune people like that out of our lives. But I think that the biggest way to prepare mentally is to know who you're dealing with, know the audience you're talking to. And we all know the people in our lives that fit this, description, who are going to kind of automatically lean into the DARVO techniques. Don't try to fool yourself. Don't try to be naive about it. Actually be very, very honest within yourself about who you're dealing with and their character. It will allow you to be much more prepared for when you have such a conversation with them. To highlight something that needs to be addressed, a behavior, something they said, something that was done, etc. Question 3. When reflecting on past interactions that left the person feeling blamed or at fault, can instances be identified where DARVO tactics might have been employed? And then how did those interactions impact the perception of the events? I can admit this would definitely be in college years and in my 20s. I've definitely dated men who employed these techniques. I, of course, did not have the vocabulary at the time to understand what that was going on. So I definitely remember, looking through a boyfriend's phone or something. I'm so thankful I'm past that very silly behavior in dealing with men that I felt I need to do that with. And, asking questions. And then the whole situation kind of got flipped on me. And now I'm a pretty strong person in knowing that I have points. I'm a very logical thinker. I'm a very analytical thinker. So I can't say they succeeded, but they definitely tried. And I'm very good at calmly walking things back through and repeating myself if necessary. So it wasn't effective, but it definitely jars you. Like, what is this person talking about? They are completely trying to flip this crap on me. So I have experienced that before. It's not fun. I would say in romantic partnerships, I've experienced it, and certain friendships, when you think people are your friends and you're not. This was also like early 20s where I experienced that with some people that I thought that were my friends, but they weren't. And I'm very thankful now for the maturity and the vigilance I have and the ability to very quickly weed out, and anybody potentially new coming in my life, I can weed that out quick. I feel that is so important for each and every person to do. Really take stock of the people around you and see who, where you can trim the fat and minimize contact or cut contact altogether, because you do not need someone who's doing this and manipulating you and honestly being an unsafe person, to your mental health, So definitely think about that exercise of who you can minimize or prune out of your life altogether. Question 4, where can professional support or resources be sought to help recognize and effectively respond to gaslighting and DARVO tactics in relationships? So I would say, because of where I found the article, I'm absolutely a huge proponent of licensed mental health professionals, and I believe that every person should go to therapy. and work with a therapist, licensed clinician, counselor, licensed clinical social worker, whatever the case is, but just a licensed mental health professional to unpack a lot of this stuff, especially if you're a person who has experienced this excessively in life, or you grew up in an environment where there were a lot of manipulative tactics and things like this. Absolutely huge fan of therapy. Go there first. I'll definitely leave some links in my description box below to this article. You can see this counselor's site, but also to a really great site, Therapy for Black Girls. It has a wonderful directory, so you can find licensed therapists who focus on Black and brown, women's problems across the country. So aside from that, when you're trying to expand your knowledge and learn more after you've worked on your healing, I definitely think working with a coach like myself and becoming more well-versed on things to be aware of, because you being more educated about abuse tactics is one of the key things that I believe any woman can do today to have better dating experiences and weed certain things out a lot more quickly. So work with a therapist and then work with a coach. My two biggest suggestions here. Question 5. How can establishing and reinforcing personal boundaries help protect individuals from falling victim to DARVO tactics in future interactions? What steps can be taken to start the process? So when it comes to establishing boundaries, reinforcing personal boundaries to protect somebody from being a victim of DARVO, I believe when you're clear and upfront early on in any relationship, especially one at work, where between coworkers, between a romantic partner, anything that's kind of you're on equal footing with them, as well as where the power dynamic may be different. So if it's with your boss, I feel that you might have to go about it in a little bit of a different way, but you still need to reinforce those boundaries, and you really need to be very calm, clear, and succinct in recalling things and specifically calling out behavior. And anytime they try to deviate, just go back to it. And as they're going down through the acronym of DARVO and employing the different techniques, I think it's important to just gray rock, and just don't respond, because they're looking for an emotional response to mess with you. That's their whole goal. It's very interesting that people do this to others, and it's almost second nature for some people who use this technique often to engage in it. But to protect yourself, I think you need to gray rock when necessary, but also be very clear about affirming your boundaries with people and setting those boundaries so they know they can't just jerk you around. And start that process by being confident in what you have to say and raising complaints. And I don't want to say raising complaints, but having some feedback for a person who may have wronged you in some way and you want to really address that issue. Don't go from a place of emotion. Definitely go from a place of being very calm, cool, and collected. And if necessary, gray rock to get yourself out of the situation, meaning just say, okay, just no emotion, and maybe come back to it at a later time when cooler heads prevail if you feel yourself really getting angry, because that's not the way you want to address these type of problems. Let's jump into one of my favorite parts of any of my blogs and article videos. And here I want to offer just my thoughts on what we've just read, how I see it translating in, my coaching and the wonderful people I coach with, and just any broader concepts that come up. Just my thoughts. All right. So just my thoughts on this article. I would say, like I said, in this current landscape of dating, one of the most important things a woman can do is not overlook red flags. And that looks a little different than it maybe looked 10 years ago. Today, women need to be very well versed on what abuse looks like, how abusers operate. I'm a huge fan and highly recommend Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft. You can get it on Amazon. Wonderful book. You can get it on audiobook. It just lays out different type of abusers and, what they do and how they act, how it escalates. And here's the thing. Abusers know exactly what they're doing. Okay? Now, people who are just manipulative use this technique, but true abusers use this technique. And like I said, because abuse has been so normalized in our day to day, a lot of people are leaning into it. And I'll use something from the book that was very insightful when they were talking about like drugs and alcohol and abuse. The book said, and that's Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft. The book said, alcohol and drugs doesn't cause abuse, but alcohol and drugs will exacerbate the effects and the behaviors of an abuser. You see what I'm saying? So the normalization of abusive behaviors in mainstream doesn't make someone an abuser. What it does is exacerbates and escalates the behavior of someone who was already abusive. And because this is coming out and a lot of this behavior is seen younger and younger, because of content young men are exposed to, manosphere, rape, or whatever, a lot of times they're leaning into abusive behaviors before their brain is fully formed, which has, I'm sure, a very long-reaching impact. But I say that to say, even for men in the demographic that we're dealing with and that I usually, date, so that's 30 and up for myself and my clients, the ages that they usually date, even if they date a little younger, they usually don't go under 30. It's very interesting to see. So the more well-versed you are and educated you are about these abusive tactics, techniques, this form of gaslighting, etc., the more easily you can point things out early, spot it, because a lot of times we dismiss things. That's what the human mind does when we don't have a name for something. So educating ourselves to what abuse looks like, types of abusers, how it escalates, how to deal with it, is one of the best things that can happen. You want to gray rock when you're in a situation when you're not safe and you just need to, appease the person by communicating, but you really want to be able to identify tactics and cut it off the first time you see it. If you're talking to a man for the first time, let's say you met him on an app, you messaged a few times, and you're having your first real conversation. So this is still far in advance of meeting one another face to face. If they say the first thing that's off, cut them. Do not give second chances here. The earlier you cut, the less foolishness you will entertain. The clearer your energy will be, the more calm and peace you will have, and that is so important. So the more the easier it is to root out this behavior very early on. Thank you for joining me today for this episode of Blogs and Articles. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Check out the links in the description box below to sign up for my next 5-day self-awareness and dating challenge. Also, check out my podcast, The Successful Invisible, next season publishing soon on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until next time, this is your coach, Jay Nell. Stay empowered and see you on the next article or blog post.